2. So first, some backstory. I'm an employee at a very popular coffee and donut shop in Canada. I am working the day shift and it's fairly busy. Anyways, into the story. So it's around 1 p.m. I am having a really great shift, having been assigned to my favorite position, front of the house. Basically, the people who take your order, make it, and clean the lobby. I also just got my training badge off, so I am now a full-time employee. So I am making a drink for a very nice British man when I see it. I see a man enter the store. He has on some sweatpants, an anime shirt on. I don't watch anime, I just know it has some Japanese text on it with a character. He was a short, pudgy guy, around 300 pounds, and very overweight. Has a kind of neck beard, it's hard to describe. It was like a beard, but nothing on his face. Like just on the neck. It looked like he had intentionally shaved the part of his face. The kicker, on top of a black, scraggly mess of hair, was a black pinstriped fedora. He enters the restaurant and holds the door open for a group of ladies leaving the store. This is when I know who I'm dealing with. He tips his fedora and says something that I could not make out. There is a steady stream of customers and there are 2 people ahead of him. Eventually, he gets up to the counter. When it is kinda busy like it was today, we have 2 people per till. One person takes the orders, the other makes it. My co-worker, an 18-year-old girl who I will call Kay, is taking orders right now. After about 2 minutes, he gets to the register. Here is how the conversation played out. Kay: "Hi there, what can I get for you today?" Neckbeard:
"Hello, milady. What is such a beautiful woman like you doing working at a place like this?"
Kay fake chuckles. At this point, we both know what is going on. Kay: "I'm just trying to make some money." Neckbeard:
"Well, that is horrible. You should be at home. Does your boyfriend know you're doing this? Surely, if he was anything like me, he would realize how special you are, and not subject you to such menial tasks."
Kay fake chuckles again. "Anyways, what can I get you?" Kay is looking more and more uncomfortable by the second. Neckbeard places order. At this point, it is handed over to me. It is my job to talk to the customer and make their drinks. Usually, I will ask them how their day was, or if they are having a nice weekend. It all started out well enough. He responded to a few questions, but seemed distracted. By the 3rd question, this guy would not have any of it. He kept on trying to talk to Kay, who unfortunately was not busy at the time. I was trying my best, but he was deaf to me. He asked her about anime, and then if she played video games. To which she responded, "I used to, but not anymore." This was a mistake, however, as Neckbeard perceived that as her saying that she did not have time for it. Neckbeard then responded by saying,
"Well, if I was dating you, you would have plenty of time for that."
Things are getting more and more uncomfortable until after what seems like an hour I finish the order. I wish Neckbeard a good day, but what happened next shocked me. As Neckbeard picked up his drinks, he said,
"Would there be a way I could contact you, milady, so we could continue this conversation?"
Kay looked shocked. Before Kay could answer, Neckbeard had taken out a business card with his name, email, and number. He had pre-printed personal cards. He then said,
"You can reach me at one of those contacts."
Winked and tipped his fedora.
"Good day, milady. I look forward to talking with you."
Then he left. I took the business card and threw it away while my co-worker went in the back to sit down. I said I would cover for her as long as she liked. We ended up laughing about it while we were on break, but I could tell she was shaken up. The manager let Kay work in the back of the store, baking the next few shifts in case Neckbeard came back. He did not, and that is just one of my Neckbeard experiences. 3. I'll be referring to the Neckbeard as POS, piece of shit. This ordeal took place our junior year of high school. POS was a classmate of mine who I at one point considered begrudgingly a friend. While I can't attest to how he looks now, in high school he was a relatively unassuming looking dude, no actual neckbeard, but I had always gotten weird vibes off of the guy. I was so creeped out by this guy that I actively avoided even looking at him for years. I made my distaste for him clear. However, we had a ton of mutual friends, so I just accepted his presence in my life. At the time of this story, He had confessed his love to my best friend multiple times, and generally creeped most girls out. Somehow he had still gotten a girlfriend during this time. Now then, onto the main event. The fall play that year was The Miracle Worker, a play about Helen Keller and her teacher, Annie Sullivan. I had gotten the role of Annie, and was just generally super pumped to play an Irish woman who took nobody's shit. POS also tried out for the play, and landed the role of the dude who sends Annie to the Keller household in the first place. He was in one scene, which he shared with me. One night I get a text from POS. This in itself wasn't surprising. We had each other's numbers and talked occasionally. Typically he would ask me how he could get people to like him better. I'd tell him to think before he speaks, and he'd tell me he couldn't change who he was. The text said something along the lines of, "Hey, congrats on the role. Since we have a scene together, I think it'd be a good idea if we got to know each other better." I asked him what he meant by that. We had known each other for years at that point, but I was curious where this was going. He responds, "I was thinking we could take turns asking each other questions." It should be noted that I don't remember exactly how he phrased it. This was around 6 years ago, and those texts are long gone. At that point in my life, I have never been the recipient of anything like this before. I blame that fact, my morbid curiosity as to where this was going, and the fact that he had a girlfriend at the time, so this seemed just like a friend thing, as the reasons I responded, "Okay, sure." While I had never had a guy pull the question game on me before, I knew how creepy POS was, so I was playing it safe with my questions in the hope he'd do the same. I was, and am, pretty nerdy, so I kept my questions in that realm. Star Wars or Star Trek, PC or console, etc. I think it was around his third turn when he sends me a question that has been burned into my memory since that night. "Have you ever watched something just for the sexual content of it?" As stated before, I really hadn't been the focus of any type of romantic or sexual advances, or any sort of behavior like this before, and I was repulsed by most things sexual. It triggered some gender dysphoria on my part, as I later figured out. So my immediate response was, "No, never," and continued with another safe question. Naively, I hoped that would be the end of it. I had underestimated POS, however, and his next question was, "Have you ever done anything physical with a guy before?" This time I responded, "No, dude. I've never even been on a date before." His response, "Really? You just seemed like the kind of girl who would have fooled around with a guy by now." For some extra content as to why this was both alarmingly creepy and confusing, I considered myself a tomboy at the time and super nerdy, as in my outfits usually consisted of a graphic t-shirt, skinny jeans, combat boots, and a sweatshirt. I didn't wear makeup, and my hair was pretty short at the time. Literally nothing about how I portrayed myself was provocative or remotely suggestive in any way. I did not express interests in guys at school, but I guess in his eyes all of that was my way of attracting guys? I realize that this is a relatively minor neckbeard experience when taken on its own, but I've got a few more stories about this dude and the other neckbeards I knew growing up. 4. So in 8th grade I met my first neckbeard. I'll be known as L, and I was hanging out with my friends A, K, and May. The man of the hour will be called DJ, because he had a weird nickname similar to that for his even stranger name. My old school district offered to send 8th graders to our country's capital for spring break, because we had just taken a big test about our government. We had to shell out a bit of money, but it was great. I shared a room with May and Kay, two close friends, and my other good friend A hung out with us during the day. My first encounter with them was on the plane. They seated us alphabetically by last name to keep track of us. My friend Kay was to one side, I was in the middle, and DJ was on my other side. And let me tell you, he wore a trench coat the whole time, even when everyone was wearing shorts. Come to remember, he wore it every day in high school. Anyway, he leans over and tells Kay and I about how we are all going to die anyway, so why not have it happen on the plane? Needless to say, I leaned against Kay the whole flight. The first official day in the capital, my best friend May and our friend A and I talked about anime, as we were all super into it at the time. Kay just listened as she never watched it. DJ must have overheard, because he started to follow my little group, which was creepy as he was alone and following a group of girls. Anyway, he latched onto my best friend May. They started talking about anime and American cartoons, since May was and is a huge tomboy, while the other three of the group were definitely more girly, so they had more in common. He starts pulling her away, which frustrates me to no end, especially when we get to the memorials for past wars, as my grandparents were veterans of some, and had died when I was young. A and K noticed this as well, and flanked me on either side. We kept trying to talk to May and bring her over, since it was going to be difficult for me and I wanted my best friend to comfort me. But whenever we got her attention, he steered her away. Finally, I was exhausted and sad, and I just wanted to go to the hotel to sleep. But there was apparently one last stop. Once everyone was there and looking around, I sat down, and explained why I wanted to leave to my friends, and I had May's attention. Apparently DJ didn't like that, and since he was close to my group, he decided to butt in and told me if I didn't remember my grandparents, my grandmother died when I was 6 and my grandfather died when I was 9, I obviously wasn't supposed to. After walking for hours, barely having gotten sleep, my severe depression and anxiety bubbling up, I just broke down sobbing into Kay's shoulder as she hugged me and rubbed my neck. May and A chewed DJ out, as no 13-year-old wants to hear that, especially since family is so important to me. Once we got to the hotel, May swore she was going to stay away from him, since he had made me, her best friend, who is super soft and timid, cry. Literally, the rest of the trip he followed us like a lost puppy, and on the way back we explained what happened to a teacher, so May was able to sit next to me on the plane ride back. This all happened around 5 years ago, as I am now out of high school and a freshman in college. DJ continued following May around high school, and even asked her out when she was drunk. Thank God her sister stopped them from doing anything sexual. Poor May is neckbeard baked, especially since she is under 5 feet with a fiery temper, and had at least one other neckbeard try to get into her pants. 5. Okay, so to start, I'm a nerd. More specifically, a comic book nerd. I'm also autistic, so my attention is usually only focused on a very small and very select number of things. I'm also female. This combination of traits, I've found, is the ultimate mating call for neckbeards. Because of this, I have a number of stories, but this one, by far, tickled me pink. Around the age of 15, while also going through a very dark goth phase, which still hasn't entirely left me, I began to visit comic book stores in my local area. I don't live far from a major city in the UK, so there are a few spots I could indulge my passion, and despite crippling social anxiety at the time, I found I was often more comfortable in places where I understood what others around me liked, and could talk about those things without feeling like a fool. This is how I met a neckbeard I shall call Wolverine Beard. I do not recall the exact time when he saw me, simply because I never saw him, ever. I know I was 18 when all this happened, and from my recollection my habits had not changed from when I started going to this particular comic book store. I would take the bus into town, walk 10 minutes to the store, which was set up along a main road out of town, and wander in. I would say hello to the nerdy-looking middle-aged comic book guys behind the counter, all of whom I came to know really well as we had an interest in Marvel Comics from the 80s and 90s. I would make my way around the store, ignoring the middle aisles of figures and trading cards, in favor of browsing the newest comic issues of that month that lined the shelves around the store, before making my way up to the second floor to rummage my way through boxes of back issues of X-Men, Uncanny X-Force, and Wolverine. From what I can remember, I never saw anyone upstairs with me. Never. Ever. I can only imagine he spotted me while I was looking through the newer issues downstairs at some point. Around May, I received a friend request on Facebook. I wasn't a big user of the social media scene back then, and I wasn't sociable enough to make lots of friends. So when I got the notification, I was surprised. I didn't recognize the name, but his profile picture, much to my joy, was Patch. For those of you who aren't into Wolverine comics or have no interest, allow me to explain. At one point in time, Wolverine in the comics used the name Patch to go undercover. He always wore an eye patch for added effect. Great character design there, Marvel. Anyway, I may have even given a gasp of excitement before adding someone I assumed I'd get along swimmingly with. Big mistake. He messaged me first, and although I was cautious, I replied. Him.
Hey, how are you?
Me, I'm fine, thank you. You? Him.
It could be better.
To most, that particular phrase is a red flag, but I was young and my social skills were lacking. I proceeded to tell him I was sorry he wasn't doing well, but I hope things get better. He replied with a,
"Yeah, thanks."
And we went quiet. It was a little while later when he messaged again, and asked me if I'd read the latest X-Men issue. I hadn't, as I had a stack of back issues to go through, and he told me I should pick it up next time I was at my usual comic book store. This is the point where I had a brainstorm, and decided to ask if he knew me, considering he was familiar with my favorite store. I kid you not, I can remember his response all these years later, mainly because it creeped me out so badly.
"Oh, I've seen you there a lot. I mostly watch you looking at the comic books, but I don't want to come over and say hi because I'm kinda shy."
Even now, if my attention is focused on something that my niche interests find appealing, I can be very oblivious to people and things around me. My friends are used to this, but they can be very protective of me because they know it makes me vulnerable in a way. He could have watched me every time I visited for years, and I wouldn't have been the wiser. Naturally, I was weirded out. I told him he should approach me in future and say hello. I might be a little awkward, but I didn't bite. He shrugged this off, totally brushing over it, as if he'd not seen my last remark, and began complaining how his life sucked and he wanted a better job and more friends. A little overwhelmed, I let him rant, and then began to ignore any further messages. He talked to himself in my inbox for a couple of weeks. He messaged me a good morning, then a good night. He talked about his work that day and his parents and his crappy little flat. I occasionally poked my head into the conversation to see what he was up to, but it only seemed to spur him on. He sent many questions ranging from my taste in comic books and graphic novels to the latest Batman movie, and then into my personal life. I answered him a couple of times, hoping that he'd done with his craziness and we could talk normally, but it always came back full circle. Sometimes while talking to himself, he'd have these random tangents and threaten to hurt himself, or say he was worthless and needed to be gone from this world. At that point in my life, I had moments of darkness myself and had some sympathy for him. Unfortunately, he grasped this quickly, and when I wouldn't answer him often enough, he threatened to do something to himself. Eventually, I spoke with my therapist at the time, who advised me to cut contact, as I had my own issues and wasn't stable enough to sort his too. I ignored him, and my life returned to normal. My 19th birthday was the fateful day I met him. As I said above, I have never seen him, and his profile picture, even when he changed it, was of a comic book character. The Green Lantern, Wolverine, Batman. I asked him once why he didn't have a picture of himself, and his reply was golden.
"I look like Wolverine."
That was it. I'm fairly certain I, of all people, would remember seeing a guy in the comic book store, looking like my second favorite Marvel character. That shiz does not slip by me, no matter how engrossed I am. Well, on my birthday I went out with my mom and a couple of relatives for shopping and food. We went into town, and after eating we stopped at some of my favorite shops for me to buy myself something nice. I was staring into a glass cabinet at a particularly beautiful and very affordably priced Storm figurine, when a very nasally voice sounded from behind me.
"Hey, Lottie."
I turned and was first assaulted by the poor attempt he'd made to cover his BO with probably Axe body spray. It hadn't worked, and it was shockingly bad. I'm only small, even smaller then, about 5'1", maybe 5'2". This guy towered over me, and he was the embodiment of triple XL. Hello? Was my only response. I tried to lean around him to see where my family was, but no biscuit.
"You don't remember me, do you?"
He was a hard one to forget. "No," was my awkward reply. When someone says that to you, you spend a good 30 seconds skimming through your brain, looking for a name or a face. I came up with nothing.
It's me, Logan.
Not his actual name, but we'll run with it for this story. Looking up at him, it took me a moment or two to try and place him before it hit me. I'd just like to say, and you've probably already guessed, he looked nothing like Wolverine. Not comic Wolverine, not Hugh Jackman Wolverine. I think he'd made a vague effect to spike his hair into 2 little points, but it looked greasy and more like he'd rolled out of bed. Also his mutton chops, he'd been so insistent he had online, was a full neck beard with a small gap on his chin, double chin, which I imagine was to demonstrate a break in the facial hair. Acne and an oily T-zone to boot, topped with a fabulous Joker and My Little Pony crossover t-shirt, and a leather jacket on top. The store was hot as fuck too, considering it was autumn and very cold outside. The sweat was glistening on him. On his top lip, on his forehead, there was a sweat stain on his shirt under his double chin. Majestic. I don't actually remember what I said. In fact, I don't think I said anything. I was a little disturbed by his appearance out of nowhere.
Are you thinking of getting that?
He asked and pointed to the figurine. I don't think I reacted, but he didn't need me to apparently.
I like Storm, she's cool, but I'm not really into black characters. I like Emma Frost better.
Emma Frost, look her up. She's always in her underwear with her boobs out. Mercifully, my older cousin, who to this day remembers the whole thing and nearly cries himself stupid with laughter at the look that was supposedly on my face, appeared from the aisle behind us and asked if I was coming with them to the next store. This bit I do remember, as I have never managed to pull this expression from another human being since. I hurriedly told him I had to go, and it was nice talking to him, all the while turning and walking toward the door. His face dropped, totally lost all its bouncy giddiness, and deflated like a balloon. A couple of my family members commented on my friend, and how he'd been looking at me over the shelves in the store, and had been in the store before that, though no one knew if he'd been watching me then. That's the guy who thinks he's Wolverine, I told them. I remember my older cousin calling him Fat Badger. I got home that day to a message from Fat Badger. He told me how good it was to finally meet me, and he enjoyed our talk. Also, if that guy who called me away was my boyfriend, he was a dick for not allowing me to talk to him longer, and how he'd never do that to me because he wants me to be happy. And if that means talking to other guys, that would be fine. I blocked him on everything after that. This isn't the end of this story, but I feel I've wrote enough for my first post. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Neckbeards in the Wild, number 11. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. Okay, now I'd like to give a bit of a shout out if I may, and I thought this would be the best video to do it. Now, I was contacted a few days ago by Mark Zickrey, also known as Mr. Sci-Fi. And he's done quite a number of things, a writer, he's done quite a number of things that any self-respecting nerd out there will be familiar with. He's worked on quite a few episodes of the show Sliders, if you remember that, was a very good show, that one. He wrote Survivors for Babylon 5. Oh goodness, James Bond Jr. I remember I used to like that when I was quite young. Friday the 13th, Real Ghostbusters, many other things, but perhaps the most prominent things are, there was an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, in my opinion, and it's certainly one of my favourite episodes of Star Trek all round, is Far Beyond the Stars, both of which he wrote the stories for. That was the episode that takes place in the past, and Benny Sisko, played by Avery Brooks, is a writer, and Deep Space Nine was all some story he'd written. Of course, there's a lot more to the story than that, but that's the gist of it. Mark is, of course, as is often good in the entertainment business, he wears many hats. He's a writer, producer, and I think he's even got a couple of acting credits as well. And the only reason I mention all of that is just to firmly establish this man has firm sci-fi/nerd credits. And that brings us nicely to Space Command, which is what Mark has asked me to give a shout out for. and he's been working on it for a few years now. I have been following his channel. I've been kind of poking my head in here and there, just seeing the progress is. I quite like he does these vlogs, these essentially walk and talk vlogs, just talking whatever's on his mind, out and about, with presumably what I assume is his phone he's recording on. I'd imagine he probably gets some strange looks, but I quite enjoy the videos. I find them quite relaxing. And that's how I first learned about Space Command. It's his own sci-fi project, and it has a number of well-known people in it. It has Robert Picardo from Star Trek Voyager, who played the Doctor, the emergency medical hologram on Voyager. And it also has Doug Jones, a great actor in general, but also a great physical actor as well. Doug Jones played Abe Sapien in the Hellboy movies. He was also quite recently played the villain in the Bye Bye Man. But most recently, I think audiences will know him as Saru from Star Trek Discovery. And I'm not going to say any more there. I don't want to keep yammering on, but I will include a link to the Space Command video in the description of this video. If I haven't, someone please yell at me and remind me to do so. And if you like what you see, I believe there is a Kickstarter link in the description of the video I'm linking to. And if you feel like you might want to support it, you have the option of doing so there. Okay, and I think we're done there. So with that, I'm heading off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.